Today, beer is the most widely consumed alcoholic beverage in the world. It's also likely one of humanity's earliest prepared beverages, dating as far back as the Neolithic era. In many ways, beer has a shared history with bread. When humanity first domesticated cereal grains 10,000 years ago for the production of bread and other foods, beer production quickly followed. Some theories even suggest that beer came first, and was what first encouraged humans to switch to an agricultural lifestyle. Either way, beer and bread share very similar ingredients, and having previously made my own bread from scratch for my original sandwich, that seemed like a good place to start. Traditionally, most beers are made from the barley plant. However, since I use wheat in my sandwich, I'm going to attempt to make 100% wheat beer using my leftover wheat I grew for my sandwich. I ended up growing a fairly large quantity of wheat previously, but for the most part it's just been sitting around in my pantry, so it'll be great to find another use for it. While previously I just needed to grind the wheat seeds to make flour, there's actually an extra step that's necessary before I can start brewing the beer: malting. Malting is a process of causing the seeds to start germinating and sprouting. By doing this, the wheat seeds start to turn the starches in the seeds to sugars, which is what I'll need for my brewing. To malt my seeds, I soak them in water for several hours, and then spread them out and let them sit for 3 days, waiting for them to start sprouting. While I let the wheat seeds malt, there is still one beer ingredient I need that isn't involved in bread: hops. Hops are a flower that are used primarily for flavoring in beer, but also for its antibacterial effects that help preserve the beer. It can impart bitter, zesty, or citric flavors depending on the variety of hops. Prior to the introduction of hops in the 9th century, beer was flavored using a collection of herbs and flowers called grut. Hops usually grow best along the 48th parallel north, with Germany and the Pacific Northwest being some of the largest producing regions. Hops are generally harvested in the fall. However, it's spring right now, and I want my beer now. So I went to visit Roundtable Hops to learn their unique solution to the limits of the hops harvesting season.
Hi there, welcome to Roundtable Hops. You are standing in the world's first 4-season hydroponic hop greenhouse. This greenhouse allows us to grow fresh hops 365 days a year and supply them to brewers when they normally wouldn't be able to have access to fresh hops. In here we can cut that 5 to 6 month growth time down to about 4 months, and we can manipulate those seasons with lighting and temperature and nutrients that we provide to those plants.
So instead of one harvest a year, how many are you able to get?
Each plant can be harvested about 3 times a year.
Does it take you 3 years to grow your own plants?
We get full quality in the first harvest and about half the yield. We get full yield in our second harvest, which is about 8 months after a new plant is brought in.
Okay, so being able to grow it indoor and all controlled, everything's
correct.
A lot more efficient.
Right. So essentially that is because we are providing those nutrients directly to the root stock, rather than having the rootstock have to go and search out those nutrients. So our plants don't require the structure of a large root mass. We can keep the root mass very, very small and just feed those nutrients essentially intravenously.
So with the added expenses of having to build the greenhouse and heat it and everything, is it as economical as just growing it in the field once a year?
It is. In terms of our comparison to soil-grown crops, we can reduce the amount of water we use by 90%. That's the big one. Hops require a ton of water, and with our drain recirculating system, we have zero wastewater essentially. So the only water that is waste for us is not even really waste, it's just what's absorbed by the plants.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the whole hydroponic system you have set up here?
So hydroponics is the growing of a plant without the use of soil. So the nutrients for that plant come from a nutrient solution and are administered directly to that plant. So in our case, we have these buckets here. There's a feed line here that administers our nutrient solution, and this is just a drip ring that goes around. So these nutrients come out of this drip ring, trickle down through this material, and then they exit this drain right here, and through this pipe right here, they flow back to our reservoir. So it's just a completely recirculating system. Just artificially replicate the exact requirements that variety might have to grow in whatever climate it grows in. But we can shift that time frame to any point in the year.
And then in terms of like hops, is there anything specific for 100% wheat beer that I need to worry about?
100% wheat beer, you're probably not going to have a very sweet beer.
Yeah.
Wheat has a very grainy taste, at least in my experience, so you're probably not going to need to rely on hops to a huge extent. That being said, not being able to add any complexity in your grain, the hops are probably where you'll be able to experiment. So bringing in a few different varieties that maybe complement each other or add some complexity to that beer would probably benefit the beer at the end of the day.
Thanks for the tour of your facility.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad we could have you out, and we'd love to get you guys some hops and get you brewing a beer.
All right, awesome, thanks.
Yeah, cheers.
Cool. difficult. Now that I have my hops, the last ingredient that I'll need to make my beer is yeast. I previously explored making my own yeast when I needed it to carbonate the root beer I had made before. For my beer, I was going to reuse a strain of yeast made from the headwaters of the Mississippi. In order to get enough yeast for my batch of beer, I added my remaining yeast to a sugar solution on a mixer, which allows the yeast to quickly grow over the next couple days. Meanwhile, the wheat seeds I had left melting had started to sprout, which means the last step is to dry them out in the oven. Set to the lowest temperature, with the oven door open, the seeds will dry out over the course of 8 to 14 hours. Then they'll finally be ready to turn into beer. Now I've collected my hops and yeast and malted my wheat, and now I have everything to start brewing. So I'm here with Brad at Northern Brewer, and he's gonna show me how to make an all-wheat beer.
It's definitely not a very traditional beer to make. Generally, when you're using 100% wheat, it's gonna gum up your mash tun a little bit. So it presents a few challenges, but I certainly think we can work through it.
So usually a wheat beer isn't all 100% wheat?
No, normally, in fact, a wheat beer is somewhere around 50% malted wheat and malted barley. The barley helps to maybe make the mash a little bit more liquid so it doesn't stick up. But in this case, the 100% wheat beer might be a little challenging.
But still doable?
Still doable.
All right.
So for this one, generally you use a 3-vessel system to make an all-grain beer, but since the wheat is so sticky, we're gonna go with the brew in the bag. But that'll make it real easy to filter the liquid through the wheat, and we can simply pull the bag out when we're done, and we don't have to worry about sticking up any mash tuns.
The first step we needed to do was mill my malted wheat, cutting them up so that enzymes can break down the starches further. Then we filled the vessel with 5 gallons of water.
There we go, perfect. So now that we got the water heated to 125, what we're gonna do is go ahead and put the bag in and just kind of curl it over the edge of the kettle. And this will allow us to get the wheat in there without gumming up anything. We'll stir the wheat in and we're gonna let it rest for about 20 minutes.
So what's happening right now? Why do we put it to this temperature?
Well, the reason we put it about 120 degrees here is to help the enzymes that are present in the malt to break down some of the longer chain beta-glucans and proteins, which are molecules present in wheat malt. And those molecules are really what makes the wheat difficult to work with. It can cause the mash to gum up, almost become a dough ball. And when that happens, it's really, really hard to continue on with your brewing process. So this rest at 120 will break those down, make the mash a little bit more fluid, a little easier to work with, and it won't be so gummy.
So now it's been 20 minutes. What's next?
Well, now that we got this 20-minute protein rest done, what we're gonna do is actually go ahead and relight the burner. And as we raise the temperature, we get to 152 degrees, which is in the temperature range of what's called the saccharification rest. And so the enzymes that are in the malt, yet a whole different family of enzymes called amylase enzymes, they are going to start to break down all the starches present in the wheat malt and turn them into fermentable sugars. And that's what we add the yeast to create beer.
Okay. And all these enzymes are naturally occurring in the wheat?
Yes, they do. The malting process is actually what activates these enzymes, which are already present in the wheat. So It's kind of a self-contained little package. It's pretty fantastic. So what we'll do now is just give it one last stir, place the lid on it to try to maintain temperature as best we can. Now it's a waiting game.
All right. So come back in an hour?
Exactly. We'll check this again in an hour. Been an hour, we spent that at 152 degrees. So that should have caused all the starches to convert to sugars. So the next step is we're going to take the bag out, let it drain for a while, let any of the extra liquid drain back into the kettle, and we're just gonna put it in this bucket here. We're done with that. And what we've got left is our wort. So let's get this fired back up and bring it to a boil. All right, Andy, well, we've come to a boil here. After all we've done so far, we're making real good progress. And so now that we're boiling, it is time to add the hops.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do here is boil for a grand total of 60 minutes.
So the fact that it's boiling right now, what effect is that having on it?
So right now, the boiling is actually accomplishing a few things. First and foremost, it's making sure that this wort is sanitary. So the only thing that will ferment it is the yeast that we're actually going to add at a later stage. The boiling action will convert certain compounds in the hops and turn them into bitter compounds. So otherwise, the bitterness is not really detectable by our palates, but once we boil the hops, makes the molecules in the hops kind of change their shape, and that's what we perceive as bitterness.
Okay.
So we'll let this boil for a while, and later on in the boil, we'll add some more hops to get some flavor and aroma. All right, so we got 10 minutes left in the boil here. We've been going for a while, and at this point, what we're gonna do is add some more hops. That's gonna provide us with some flavors and aromas of the actual hop themselves. So go ahead and add the hops. And so if you add hops late in the boil, instead of providing much bitterness, it's going to provide a lot more hop flavor and hop aroma. Because they're not being boiled as long, the compounds in the hop are not being volatilized off by the boil. So it retains that in the wort, so when the beer's done fermenting, that hop flavor is really going to stick out. And go ahead and stick the chiller in. Perfect. All right, now we got 10 minutes left on the boil, and the reason we're sticking the chiller in right now is just to make sure that it is sanitized because it's in the boiling liquid. So we don't want anything not sanitary touching our beer after it's been chilled. So we'll let this boil for another 10 minutes. We'll come back, hook this up to water, and chill the whole batch down. And now that we've got it chilled, we've pulled the chiller out. We're sitting right about room temperature. So the next step is open the valve and let her flow into the fermenter. There's a little straining device in the bottom of the kettle to make sure none of the hops come through into the fermenter.
Okay. So what do you think is causing it to be so milky?
Well, that's kind of a function of being 100% wheat beer. Wheat in general has a pretty high protein content, and despite our best efforts to break them down at the very beginning of this brew, a lot of them make it through into the fermenter. But right now it's all being mixed up as it sits. A lot of those will settle to the bottom of the fermenter and it'll clear up quite a bit. It'll still be cloudy, but it will clear up.
It looks like after a wet vacuum, like you're draining it out.
Boy, that's a lot milkier than I thought it was going to be. All right, well, now that we're done filling the fermenter from the boil kettle, go ahead and place our airlock on there. That's basically just a little device. It acts as like a one-way valve, so it'll allow the carbon dioxide created from fermentation to escape, but nothing else is going to go back in. So we just pull the fill hose out, put the airlock in. Next up is yeast. We'll just dump that whole baby in. And now that we put yeast in, this is technically considered beer. Even though it hasn't started to ferment, legally it's considered beer at this point.
Okay.
So we did it.
All right. Who wants a drink? So at this point, it takes about a couple weeks for it to ferment then?
Yeah, this should ferment out within 2 weeks.
All right.
So you'll see a nice head of foam start to rise on it. And as fermentation subsides, that foam head will go down and eventually collapse on top of the beer. And at that point, we're ready for packaging. We can go ahead and bottle.
Guess I'll come back in 2 weeks to bottle it.
Well, I'll be here. You know where to find me.
After letting the beer ferment for a week, I returned back to Northern Brewer to finish up the beer.
As you can see, things have cleared up pretty nicely. I was a little concerned that it was going to be a pretty milky beer, but
Actually, looks like a beer now.
yeah, it does. It does. Looks like a nice light wheat beer. So we've drawn a little sample here. We've got our hydrometer in there so we can check what's called our finishing gravity, which is one number you can use to determine the alcohol content of the beer. Basically the density of the liquid, which correlates pretty much to how many sugars are in solution. And so right now we have a reading of 1.008. If you put that through a little equation, you come up with an alcohol percentage of this beer of about 4.7%.
Okay.
So that's right in line with normal wheat beer.
So it worked.
Biggest problem now is it's flat. What we're gonna do today is get it into bottles and let it naturally carbonate.
We don't need to add any extra yeast or anything?
Nope, there's still plenty of yeast that's floating around in solution in the beer itself. So what we do need to do is actually add a little dose of sugar and then put it in the bottles. And then the yeast that's in the suspension now is going to ferment that sugar and cause these bottles to carbonate.
Okay. Using some of the honey I've collected in the past, we carefully measured the exact amount we needed, added some water, and brought it to a boil to help sterilize it. And if we add too much, it might cause it to explode?
Yeah, if you add too much sugars, the bottles will overpressurize and you basically have a case of grenades. And as we wait for this to come to a boil, let's go ahead and start sanitizing all of our bottles and sanitizing all of the gear for bottling.
All right. With the honey at a boil now, we added it to a bucket and then siphoned the beer into the container as well. Then that sludge at the bottom, that's all...
Almost all yeast.
What does it taste like?
Yeast has got a very interesting flavor to it.
Yeah.
If you want to taste it, you can.
Looks delicious. That's sour. Like initially tastes like beer, and then super sour. I wouldn't recommend that. To the beer all ready to go, we could start the bottling process. Using a bottling wand, we carefully filled all the bottles, leaving just enough headroom at the top, and then capped them. So all my beer's bottled now.
Yep, we got it all bottled, and within about 2 weeks, the honey that we put into these bottles will cause it to carbonate, and we should have a nice, light, delicious wheat beer.
Just gotta wait 2 weeks then, huh?
Wait 2 weeks, exactly.
And I can finally try my beer.
Exactly.
All right, let's see you in 2 weeks then.
Sounds good.
Hey Brad, so it's been 2 weeks, so hopefully my beer is carbonated now.
We can only hope. Hopefully the fruits of our labor pay off here, so
Yeah,
like those labels you put on there.
thanks. All right, I even brought some of my homemade glass cups to try it in.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. And if everything went well, we should get a little bit of a carbonated sound coming out here, so let's, sounds good. I'd say we have success. We've definitely got carbonation in there. Nice, really nice firm white frothy head. Smells nice and clean.
Smells like beer.
Smells like beer, looks like beer.
Yeah.
Must be beer. Cheers.
Cheers. Turned out pretty good.
Kind of surprised it cleared up nicely. It's kind of a far cry from that really milky stuff we put into the fermenter.
Yeah.
Wow, I'd say everything worked out nicely. Nice light in color, light in body, a little bit under 5% alcohol. Well, some people say 100% wheat beer can't be done, but here's the proof. Nice light beer, quite enjoyable. Cheers again.
Cheers. Thanks to Brad and the crew at Northern Brewer, and now my wheat beer. And I don't think without them this would have been a success. So be sure to check out their YouTube channel, Brewing TV, where you can check out other home brewing tutorials and how-tos, such as their all-grain brewing episode with Wil Wheaton.